Good afternoon, friends, and a very warm welcome to this 47th in the series webinar on a very important topic today. This webinar is being brought to you by IHRDI, or Inclusive Human Resource Development Initiative. Friends, the topic of today's session is relevance of public sector undertakings in India, issues and challenges. So, friends, if you recall, when we got independence from the British rule, roughly our GDP, we were contributing just 2 to 3% of the world economy. During this around 200 years of British rule, the entire economy had been destroyed, wherein we just became a sort of, a raw material funding source or a sourcing source for the British, wherein the raw materials were brought in from here into Manchester, and thereafter, they were produced into the products or finished goods, and thereafter they were sent to India as a market. Friends, when we got independence, we just had 18 public sector undertakings, and they were generally in the domain of ordnance factories and otherwise. Thereafter, the leaders of that point of time, with Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru at the helm of the affairs, and prior to him, alongside Subhash Chandra Bose, they were so much impressed by the Russian model that point of time, the USSR model, which was for building up infrastructure, building up big industries, building up big dams, so as to provide lot of public sector undertakings which were able to bring about capital investment and others, so that the entire economy revolves around all this. So, friends, when the industrial policy resolution came out in the year 1948, we were all for mixed kind of model, mixed kind of economy, wherein the private sector will also exist along with the public sector, and their roles were demarcated, wherein commercial activities and those activities which were more into consumer aspects, they were bestowed, the responsibility was given to the private sector, and those areas wherein there were long gestation period, wherein lot of capital investment was required, and therein which were all basic and fundamental in nature, the responsibility of such undertakings or responsibility of such functions were given to the public sector undertaking. So this is how we started, wherein with the Bhakra Vyas, this Nangal Dam, and then Steel Authority of India Limited, and then lot of emphasis on the creation of infrastructure, creation of airways, railways, posts. And the idea was to bring about, and this entire model was came to be known as a Mahalanobis model, because of the inputs given by a famous economist, Mr. Mahalanobis. So the objectives behind public sector undertakings that point of time was to have a lot of capital investments in those areas, and this was all provided by the 5-year plans, which started immediately after 1950s, and the idea was to accumulate all your income, accumulate all your resources at one point of time, and then further expand it on those resources which are very much required for the people of the nascent nation. And idea was to bring about and build up a rapid infrastructure so as to support the industrialization and economy, and move away from agriculture related or the primary sector related economy to the secondary and the tertiary sector related economy. So, as I said earlier, long gestation period industries, they were kept in the public sector undertaking. Idea was to improve upon the basic infrastructure, the utilities like power sector, water sector, transportation, airways, railways, roadways. They were also put up in the public sector areas, and the energy sector also, because of the energy security. And the idea was that you can go for import substitution, wherein so that we have less and less dependence upon imports or import substitution, and then also for regional balanced development, because certain areas were more developed than other areas, so as to bring about equity in terms of the incomes and that way. So, friends, all these years we had wonderful institutions which came in the field of banking in 1969 and 1980. Mrs. Indira Gandhi nationalized 14 banks in 1969 and further 6 banks in 1980. So roughly 20 banks were nationalized. We focused on development banking also. Then when we went into the area of energy sector, like I said, with Indian Oil Corporation, NTPC, all these. But friends, all this changed when we adopted the model of liberalization, privatization and globalization in the year 1990s, wherein the idea was, so as to, open our economy to the world. Now we are not talking about, competition between the states and in the country. We were talking about, the global competition, wherein the production could be in one country, and then, marketing and the sale could be in other country as such. So during these years, the idea was to kill the monopoly, because monopolies had made all sectors, especially the public sector, but also the private sector, they had made them inefficient and unaccountable. So if you would have remembered that, when liberalization came around, even the private sector headed by Mr. Bajaj from Bajaj Scooters, they made a lot of hue and cry with this, but the government never bent because of external pressures also, and the country was opened up. Thereafter, many of the process of disinvestment came down, and many of the public sector undertakings, both at the state level as well as the central level, they were disinvested, meaning thereby that, the private sector, the private capital was infused there, and even to those public sector undertakings which were considered to be working well and working efficiently, they were provided more autonomy in terms of manpower, in terms of financial resources, so that they can take their decisions and come out and compete with the private sector. So the concept of, Navratinas, or 9 gems, which were derived from the, Mughal era, and thereafter Chandragupta, Vikramaditya came around, so as to identify 9 profit-making good public sector undertakings at the center level, and their contribution was highlighted, and their contribution was acknowledged, and they were given more powers to compete with the private sector. Thereafter, in 2010, the Maharatnas and then Mini Ratnas also came around. So today, when I said we started with 18 public sector undertakings in the year 1947, to today around 350 public sector undertakings have come up. And during all these years, the PSUs have, gone with a gamut of spread, from of areas like strategic areas to even commercial areas to even hotels to even, energy sector to even nuclear sector to defense sector. All these areas have come up, but of late, it has been a realization that in those areas wherein the private sector can do well, they should be doing well, and then the government had no business to be in business in those areas wherein the private sector can be encouraged, and they could be taken the initiative. And yes, in those areas only, which is strategic in nature and which is more, useful for the general public and for the defense, only the public sector undertakings would be in those areas itself. So in view of this, since last around, 2014 and so, a lot of emphasis has been given on for consolidation, and maybe, for certain mergers have come up, amalgamations have come up, and even privatization has been talked around. How it has gone around, again, this is a question mark, but yes, the talk is therein, with, the associates of State Bank of India being merged into State Bank. Then it is also a talk that, certain oil sector companies, like which are smaller in nature, like HPCL, BPCL, or IOP, they could be merged with bigger companies like Indian Oil Corporation and all. And in the banking sector, the idea is quite, has taken shape because of the mergers, and now the finance minister, the honorable finance minister, during last budget has also talked about, privatization of 2 major banks, so as to, their idea is that maybe there are 5-6 banks only in the system, and with these banks are good enough to compete, not only at the Asian level but at the world level. So friends, during all this time period, the what has happened is that though the number of public sector undertakings have come up, but after 1990s and all, it has been realized that, it is not better to support inefficiency and all. The government is trying to sell off Air India from last quite some time, because these are major undertakings which are making losses of around maybe 20,000, 25,000 per 25,000 crores per annum, and it's a drain on the economy. So that realization is there, and with this, the government, it seems, is quite, far, quite thought over, that they would be able to, sell off certain public sector undertakings or disinvest or come out with all this. So friends, the now issues are that whether the public sector undertaking is relevant still today, because 1947 to 2000, roughly 21, a lot of water has flown down the Ganges. So therefore, what is the relevance of PSUs to you today? Whether the PSUs are required? If the PSUs are required, then what areas they are required? What are the pros and cons of having the PSUs in today's time? Or whether we should just go for fully privatization, or maybe it would be just like throwing the baby with the bath towel. So all these are issues, and which are very important issues as of these days, and they are being debated also. The opposition parties, they are also at the neck of the government, that they are selling the family silver, that railways is being privatized. So a lot of hue and cry is also being made. So friends, we thought over, and we were having certain suggestions from quite some time to have a topic on this. So for this, we have invited today two very eminent speakers, Mr. Bhushan Bhatia and Dr. Sanjeev Gupta, to discuss and deliberate on these issues. Just to introduce, Mr. Bhatia has retired as a senior officer from Punjab National Bank, and he has handled various assignments during his stint therein in the bank, and including at the national level and at the international level. He has also, worked in the area of grievance redressal, ombudsman, and he was also a member of permanent Lok Adalat Panchkula for 3 years. And then thereafter, his superannuation, he is now a practicing advocate with Punjab and Haryana High Court on the issues of banking and the service matters. And he is also a regular at DRTs and all these aspects. And as per his qualification goes, Mr. Bhatia is, a law graduate and an MBA HR, along with the CAIIB, which you would be knowing that many bankers, they go for this. Plus, he has a course from University of Auckland for the trainers. And he is also an author, a researcher. He's writing papers. He's having a blog, and he's having a website also, A to Z in banking. So, Mr. Bhatia, a very warm welcome to this podium. And I'm sure with your experience around in the banking sector, you should be able to throw a lot of light and enlighten our audience on the issue. So, warm welcome. Friends, it's my privilege to introduce the second speaker of the day, Dr. Sanjeev Gupta. Dr. Gupta has retired as the Chief General Manager, Manufacturing from SML Isuzu Limited. He is, an electrical engineer, and thereafter he went on to augment his qualification by adding MBA in the human resource side, doctorate in management, and he also specializes in total quality management area. And he has attended a number of training programs both at the national and abroad, including a training program in Japan. He is now a freelance trainer. He is going to various and associated with various universities and institutions of eminence, wherein he is enlightening and disseminating his knowledge and information for both the students as well as the officers and the executives. Dr. Gupta, warm welcome on this podium. And I'm sure with your expertise, we'll be able to gain a lot therein today. So, for not taking much long, I'll first request Dr. Gupta to come up and to speak about the relevance of PSUs and with his own experience, how whether to go for privatization or not. And thereafter, Mr. Bhatia will come up, and then we'll have a question and answer round therein. So, friends, if during the session, if you feel that there are certain queries, you may just post it in the chat box, and we can take up the session questions later on while the two honored panelists have just completed their presentations. So, welcome, Dr. Gupta, and the podium is all yours now, sir.
Thank you, sir. Sir, can you please allow me to share?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So it is still not. Sir, I am not allowed to share. Yeah.
Done, sir. You may you may share.
Yeah. I hope the
Yeah, it's visible, Doctor. It's visible.
thank
You
you.
may please go ahead.
Thank you. So today we are discussing the relevance of public sector undertakings in India. And the question is whether selling a family silver is a right step or not. Generally, we in India say that we don't sell our property to run our house. So, similarly, when we talk of the nation, should we sell our public sector undertakings where we have invested so much money and run the country? The question at this moment is, should government run the business or not? There have been policymakers who believe that yes, to some extent, government has a business to run, and some of the policymakers say that no, it is not government's job. Let it go to the private hands. And some of them say that well, it can be thought over, it can be based on case-to-case basis. As Dr. Chaddha has already said that post-independence, when we got independence in 1947, the scenario was different. Now, whether at that time it was right decision to invest in the public sector undertakings or not, let's look at the scenario at that time. Our industrial week was very weak. We didn't have any industry, and specifically the large-scale industry. The level of savings of people was very low. People didn't have money to invest, and certainly infrastructure was so poor. We didn't have the roads, we didn't have the energy, we didn't have the infrastructure to run any organization, and at that time our technological competence was very poor. Of our own, we could not have set up. In a private sector also could not have set up an industry. And people were very reluctant to invest in the large industrial sectors. And at that time, the world has already crossed over to the industry 3.0. And the foreign investors are also reluctant to invest in India, specifically with the private sectors, because they were not sure whether they would be able to get the return on the investments they are making. So what was the way forward at that time? In my view, investment in public sector undertakings at that time was the right choice because we wanted to have a rapid economic development. We wanted to create more infrastructure where people were not ready to invest. We were not sure of the return on investment. And then we had a huge unemployment. Where to generate employment, how to generate employment was one of the major questions the government of India at that time was facing. We wanted to improve our agriculture, industrial productions, and then we were importing so many things at such a high cost that it would not have been possible for the Indian public to buy those. And then at that time, the government thought that let's use the public sector as an instrument for economic growth. Let's use our own money to invest and assist small scale and industrial units to flourish so that we can have an all-round growth. If I talk of industrial revolution, as I said, the world has already gone over to 3.0. That means they were already in using to some extent an IT. They were already using mass production bases. They had the technology to produce at a low cost. So at that time, there was no other solution than invest of its own. Let the government invest money. Government still could attract some of the collaborators to invest along with the Indian government so that they are sure that they are going to get their money back. And at that time, some of the critical core sectors the government thought of investing, like they set up Steel Authority of India for steel production, they set up BSNL for telecom sector, they set up NTPC for energy generation, BHEL for power plants, HMT for production of engineering goods. So probably at that time, they thought that all the major critical sectors, we must invest, we must generate employment for people, we must invest so that we can have our own economical growth. And from 47 to 90, as Dr. Chaddha said, that we were pursuing a path of development in which public sector was the engine for growth. and they overgrew. They were, and in some areas they also became monopolies. Like if I talk of uh, car market, there were only two type of cars which were available in the country. One was Fiat and one was Ambassador. So it was more of a seller's market. Whatever we produced, we were consuming it ourselves. Whatever quality they were producing, the buyer has to accept that quality. And since it was sellers market, people were buying whatever we were producing. So a lot of shortcomings came into the public sector. The capacity utilization became low. Efficiency because of overmanning. In a pursuit to give the employment to many people, we we hired more people than required, which ultimately gave us low efficiency. Ethics were low, and overcapitalization was there, cost overruns were there, and the main was that were we innovating? The point is that whatever technology was given to us by our collaborators, we were using that technology. Whatever they tell us to do, we were doing, but we never started innovating ourselves. And unless and until an organization innovates of its own, they cannot be very cost effective. They cannot sustain the pressures of the consumers. And at that time, inability to take quick and timely decisions came in. Political interference started coming in way back in 1970s and 80s. So overall, there was low efficiency, and people were not very happy the way PSUs were running. Not that all PSUs are bad. Some of them are still very strong. They are into profits and they can deliver whatever is required. But most of us, as Dr. Chaddha said, that we kept on expanding into PSUs, and we were about 350 PSUs. Out of them, most of them were in red. So that was the scenario in 1990, and then came the liberalization. 1991, when we opened our market for the global competitors, when MNCs started coming in. So what did we face? A huge competition. They started selling their goods in India. We were not cost efficient because till now it was all sellers market. They never thought of reducing costs. They never thought of cost efficiencies and quality of the product. At that time, if I recall, everybody used to say that such and such product, oh yes, it is made in USA. Well, let's buy it, whatever is the cost, because the quality was an issue. The cars that we were producing, the vehicles that we were producing, were of so poor quality that we could not export. And those MNCs, which have already worked for 30, 40 long years, had good quality at low cost. Technology, we had a limited technology with us. We didn't expand, we didn't innovate. And that was the reason that we in 1991 faced a lot of turbulence in the industrial units because we were facing global competition. People were bombarding us with the quality goods at low cost, and we were only dependent mostly on public sector undertakings. And at that time, Industry 4.0 had already overtaken the global manufacturers. They were talking of Internet of Things, they were talking of robots, they were talking of additive manufacturing, cloud computing, and where were we? Almost nowhere. Let's talk of BSNL. We never upgraded our infrastructure to the extent that we can compete with somebody from outside. Unless and until the companies like Airtel and Jio came in and invested money. So that was the scenario in 1991. Now, when such a competition is growing, and when we said that we are opening our license Raj system, all these companies, even the private players, when they came into it, the public sector undertakings found that, well, they cannot even compete with the Indian counterparts. Leave aside the counterparts which are in the developed countries. Even the Indian counterparts, a companies like Geo, fully Indian, they even compete with them also. So that was the time when policymakers thought that should we disinvest and use this money for somewhere else. So that was the time when decisions were supposed to be taken. Now there are many arguments and counter arguments. Should the government run PSUs or not? Well, some of the arguments are valid, but in the long run, we have been able to find that, well, all the whatever we have reservations regarding it, privatization of public sector undertakings, I think we have got solutions. Uh, some of the arguments which the policymakers who are in favor of running PSUs by the government has said says that using funds to bridge the fiscal deficit. People always say that whatever property we have, we sell it and use it for running the house. Well, it is for the government to decide whether that money is to be used for running the house or build critical sectors like healthcare, education, and other infrastructures. So, if we are able to manage by selling the PSUs or disinvesting in PSUs and using that money for the infrastructure, for the critical sectors, probably that should be a good and wise decision. The major problem that we faced was that as soon as we privatize or disinvest, there is a job loss for the employees. Well, there is a possibility, but most of the private companies who have taken over the public sector undertakings or where we have done the disinvestment, the jobs have been restructured and VRSs have been offered to some of them. But see, whenever we talk of restructuring, even if you call or take the cases of amalgamations, mergers between two private companies, there is always a restructuring because we need to re-employ people on the jobs for which they are good at. So there will be restructuring, no doubt. But as far as the job losses are concerned, the government can reduce them to a minimum or offer them an alternate employments. People also say that the tax paid by the private sector is less than what the PSUs pays. Well, yes, there are some concessions which the government of India has offered for the industry in the industrially backward areas where the taxes are low or some concessions are being given. But however, if there are such cases, some of the loopholes are there which can be closed, and but it should not deter us to disinvest and hand over it to the private sector. Similarly, people say that there will be loss of dividends. Certainly, yes, there will be loss of dividend as soon as you disinvest, but can it be compensated with the revenues and capital gains that we get? See, at this moment, if we talk, the government of India is running short of money for installing infrastructures. By disinvestment, we get a lot of money which can be used in those areas. Then there is an argument that privatization might result in monopoly. Well, till now we have not seen it. There have been few cases where the government has disinvested, where the government has handed over to the private companies. Because privatization leads to greater competition. We are talking of global competition these days, not of the Indian competition. So even if you privatize, there is not going to be any monopoly. You see any company where the disinvestment has taken place, there is no privatization. There is no monopoly. Well, there is another argument which to some extent seems to be valid, that candidates entitled for job reservations will be worse off. We have a system of job reservations in public sector undertakings for different class of people, whereas the private sector doesn't accept that norm. Doesn't accept it because they want to have uh, cost efficiency, they want to reduce their overhead costs, they want to improve their efficiency. So if the candidates, if the people are good at skill, yes, they have that skill level, then the companies won't mind hiring them. However, if we still feel that yes, job reservation has to be there, then government can certainly upgrade its investment in promoting Dalit entrepreneurship. They can help them in setting up their own units. They can give concessions. They can give all type of help they want. And certainly it is for the government now to create a public policy which have better upfront paths for such people. So for one or two odd reasons, we cannot stop the disinvestments. We cannot stop privatization of the public sector undertakings. Well, another argument came when we were discussing this in a different platform, that private sector is inefficient also. There are companies which are closing down. There are companies which have got so much loan from the government or the PA or the banks, and still they are not able to pay. Yes, agreed. There is companies which have not been able to withstand the competition, and sometimes they deliberately declare their organization sick. But then we always find that performance is not related to the ownership of industries only. The ownership, whether it is private or public, as long as there is a competitive environment and the people at the helm of the affairs are competent, well, the organizations won't go sick. Somewhere those leaders have defaulted. Similarly, another argument which came up was that uh, private sector is completely guided by the profit motives. Yes, certainly, because they are into the business to generate profits. But well, with the new CSR policies coming into play, where they have to spend 2% of their average profits, certainly there are some social welfare schemes which have been run. And let's see at the present system today, when we are into the pandemic, most of the big private sector undertakings have invested money for the welfare of people. They have started their own social activities. They have been helping the poor ones. So we can't say that the private companies are not aware of their social responsibilities. They are not aware of the welfare objectives they are supposed to take. One is they are certainly spending their 2% of their average profits on CSR activities. Plus, many companies have come up and used their own infrastructure to help the government of India. Today, if we talk of oxygen shortage, a lot of private sector undertakings have offered their infrastructure to generate oxygen and supply to the patients. So we can't say that they are immune to all these things. Yes, but certainly they are guided by the profit motives, where they have to improve their efficiencies, where they have to reduce their costs, where they have to upgrade their technologies to compete with the world's best products. So when we say why privatize, we are talking of today. When we talked of 1947 to 1990, we said that yes, public sector undertakings should be there for economical growth. Today, when the government is in a position to offload its equity in the public sector undertakings, why not do it? We have seen in most of the PSUs, leaving aside few of them who have done exceedingly well, the tenure of the managing director is 6 months, 1 year, 2 years. Before that, he understands what the company is. Being an IAS officer, he gets shifted to somewhere else. By the time he understands, by the time he starts taking decisions, he is shifted. So all these things account for their low performance. Their accountability is certainly less as compared to private sector. Let's talk of any case, Maruti today or any other company. The objective, the target for the company or for the employees is produce one vehicle after every 3 minutes. So there is an accountability. At the end of the day, he has to say that this is what he has done, this is what he could not do, and this is what is the preventive action that this problem doesn't occur next day, and next day the production is as per the requirement. So there is a complete accountability. Profits, revenues, everything is accounted for. And certainly when we talk of private sector, the political interference is minimum and decision making is very fast. Today, if we talk of efficiencies, we can compare the efficiencies of two similar units. We will find that in most of the cases, the efficiencies of the private sector is much better, and technology upgradation has been done by them. And they have a special team to improve their technology, to innovate new products, to innovate new processes to produce those products. And that is why today, if we say that we are in a position to compete with the world's best, and accountability, as I said, raises efficiencies. So today, if I look at the world market, we call it as VUCA. I'm talking of industrial environment. Very, very volatile, no doubt in it. Dynamics of change is changing. What we used to call as a change, every day we say that change is changing. Lifespan of products is reducing. We talk of a mobile phone, probably the life cycle is 6 months to 8 months. After that, we don't find that in the market. So the market is becoming so volatile that they want every day, they want a new thing. Markets are uncertain, dynamic. Small cause has worldwide consequences. Let's take of 2008 case. One bank can shake the whole world economy. That is the market today. That is the industrial environment today. And it's becoming more and more complex. We used to, when we were in 80s and 90s, we used to draw a cause and effect diagram that this is cause, this is the effect, this is how we are supposed to modify our processes and all that. But today, it has been replaced with complex interconnected chains. We used to have a TV with a antenna and a top box. Today we have TV in our hands. Today we have TV in our classrooms, Wi-Fi's. Everything is changing in such a complex way that it is becoming very difficult for the industry to sustain its growth. IoT has changed the way we live. And then there is an unpredictability. Today, I should say the forecast model. Whatever I used to forecast, the model was there. Today, there is a big change in it. I cannot forecast my tomorrow's or day after tomorrow's sales because the market is volatile. The market is changing. And then research. Research is also bringing out new things. Just for an example, I should say, when we were the young students or when we were in the schools, our parents and mother used to say that we must eat a lot of desi ghee because it keeps your body agile and it is a must for a body. Then came a phase when the doctors and the research said, no. Desi ghee is very bad for the health. Your cholesterol gets high and it's not good for the heart. And today again, if you talk to the doctors, they say, no, don't completely stop the desi ghee consumption. It is good for your bones. It is good for your joints. So there has been so change in the research inflows that we have to keep up with that also in this market. So when we are facing such a huge market, when we are facing such a huge volatility in the market, that means we have to be constantly on our toes. And unfortunately, Indian public sector undertakings have not kept the pace with them. Let's take the case of HMT. In probably even till 1990s, they were one of the best public sector undertakings. I still remember the machines that we used to buy from them. So robust, so good in working. But what happened? Today, we don't even hear the name of HMT because the decisions taken were very delayed, the technology was not upgraded, and people became lethargic that our job is safe. Our salary will come on 1st of every month. Whatever we may do, we may not do. And today we say HMT is on the brink of a sale. And similarly, BSNL, after Jio came in, after Airtel came in, Vodafone came in, people stopped buying the connections from BSNL. I am a party to the Punjab Tractors Limited. When it was taken over by Mahindra, we were the semi-government. Government of Punjab had a maximum shares in that. And till 2000, we were one of the best tractor manufacturing companies in India. But then, all of a sudden, the decision making became slow. The people started overproducing, overmanning. And finally, what happened? The government of Punjab had to sell it. And sell it at a very low price. Because by the time the decision was taken to sell it, the share prices have gone drastically down because of huge inventories. And then Mahindra & Mahindra takes it over, almost a sick unit, invested about 1500 crores. And at that time, Mahindra & Mahindra thought that the 1500 crores will be recovered in 3 years. But looking at the strength of the company, the total recovery was made in 1.5 years. So that is the strength of cost efficiencies, technology upgradations, and administration, the management. Indian telephone industry is a monopoly in Indian telephone market. They were the only manufacturers of telephone instruments. But well, because of inefficiencies, we lost. Air India, we are still struggling to sell it because of the huge losses that has been incurred. For the last 2 years, the government is trying to sell it, but there are no buyers for it as yet. So that means there is something really wrong which is troubling the public sector interface. Let's talk of some developed countries. UK, they also disinvested in 1980s. Eastern Europe, they broke the state monopolies. And Germany sold 13,500 companies in 2 years. So it is not new for the government to sell off its companies or the public sector undertakings. Other countries, everybody is trying to come out of this business and concentrate more on their basic work. But however, as Dr. Chaddha said, that there is always a word of caution. Should we privatize ISRO? Should we privatize those defense equipment manufacturing units which are strategic, where the security of India can be compromised? No, certainly not. Explosives, chemicals, if we give them into the hands of a private sector, probably we are in for trouble. And DRDO. Well, DRDO is a different case, an example. Few years back, I think probably nobody in India knew that DRDO is an organization which is doing research, because they have become rusted few years back. But in the last few years, they have come out of it. They have really done a great research as far as defense equipments and defense technology is concerned. And recently they came out with pharmaceutical research. So I don't say that private sector undertakings are not good. But at this moment, there is a requirement that let's get out of it as far as possible. Even if we have Maharatnas like BHEL, Coal India, GAIL, Steel Authority, but should we continue managing them for what? Let's talk of Steel Authority of India Limited. There are few parallel companies which are producing steel, including Tata's. Then why should we invest and waste our managerial manpower, our administrative manpower in managing companies like Steel Authority of India? Engineers India Limited. Yes, one time they were the pioneers in design. But today we have alternates. Why should we keep on taking that legacy with us? So there is a need to rethink. There is a need to uh, re-debate that should the government continue doing the business. In my view, what I have seen in the last few years, where public sector undertakings have been taken over, and I have seen the way private sector has responded to the world's requirement, whether it is volatile requirement, whether it is consumer requirement, whether it is competition as far as quality or cost is concerned, the Indian industry has really responded, and they have not only responded, they are now in one of the world's best eyes also. Let's talk of Mahindra Group, the largest producers of tractors in the world today. It's not because of only that they have the infrastructure, but the quality of their products, the cost of their products, the after sales of their products is must be one of the best. That's why they are the largest tractor manufacturers today. So why not hand over such sectors to them? Why tell HMT to keep on producing tractors which are not being bought by the consumers? So that is what I always say, that let's relook, rethink the areas which can be handled by the private sector and which can be more efficiently run by the private sector. Why burden the government on running it? This is what I want to say. Thank you so much, friends. I hope I have made my points clear. There can be counter arguments. We can discuss them in the question and answer session. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Gupta, for a very comprehensive presentation on how public sector undertakings came around, what were the pros and cons, and why they are required, what is the relevance today, and what are the areas wherein they should be therein, and what are the areas wherein they should not be there. So thanks a lot for this very interesting presentation, and the case about Mahindra and about tractors was quite interesting. So now I request the second panelist of the day, Mr. Bhushan Bhatia, to take over from here and to talk about the relevance, and especially in the domain of the banking sector. So Bhatia sahab, the dais is all yours now. Warm
Uh,
welcome.
so thank you very much, and welcome to all audience, and thanks a lot to Dr. Sanjeev Chaddha as well as Dr. Sanjeev Gupta. Dr. Sanjeev has given very good introduction of the system starting from the very beginning, and Dr. Sanjeev Gupta could do very nice, give very nice description of public sector versus privatization. So after going through these two discussions, for me, I think sometimes uh, just, I am facing some problem in sharing my screen. So
Yes, Dr. Sahab, you can present. Bhatia sahab,
pardon.
you may go on. You may try to
Nahi,
go on.
nahi, my screen is visible. Otherwise,
Not yet, not yet.
not yet.
You,
Na, I want to
yeah,
share my
you are
screen
visible.
also.
Please go on
Uh,
present now,
yes.
and then
Uh,
in the screen, whether you want to present the screen or browse.
okay, let me continue maybe in between. So friends, definitely we had very good discussion about privatization, disinvestment, and all these things. Now, my topic that will be restricted to banking part only. And in banking, now there are two aspects which are going on. One aspect is about merger and amalgamation, and second aspect is privatization. So both the aspects are going on side by side. Mergers, there has already been merger of few banks. So let me share my screen if I am able to do it, because this screen sharing option, it is not coming to me present now. Is okay. And
Mr. Bhatia, you have that present now option available to you.
yes, that is there. That's why I am presenting.
So
And there, when I,
then
yes,
you have your entire screen there. When you
yes.
so you
So
just click it on the entire screen,
yes.
and then you must have got something on your screen. You can press that, and then share button will get highlighted.
Okay, let it be. Yes. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So, is it okay now?
Yeah,
Okay,
it's coming. Yeah, it's visible now.
okay, fine. Thank you very much. So, starting from this bank mergers and disinvestment in India. Earlier, before nationalization, from the very beginning, there were so many banks, and all of the banks were private banks, even Punjab National Bank and other banks. And some of my friends who might have dealt with these banks at that time also, these banks were writing limited after their name, the Punjab National Bank, like this. And in the end, it was limited. So at that time, keeping in view the requirement of the social system in India, because it was very important, because most of the population in India, it is in villages, and people didn't have access to the banking system, particularly in rural India, or you can say even in small towns also. So there was a good scope for expansion. But the private banks, because they were owned by business houses and so-called lalas, so they were not just even they are not ready to open their branches in rural areas and all these things. So there was a need to bring the social this banking system available to the society at large. So banks were nationalized, and earlier 14 major banks were nationalized, 6 more banks were nationalized, then one there were 20 banks, and there are new Bank of India that merged with Punjab National Bank, like this. And that period up to 1990, there was expansion. The concept of public sector, this priority sector came into effect after it was after implementation of lead bank scheme. Lead bank scheme came into the system in 1972, and one district was assigned to every bank. One district assigned to every bank who was having the maximum number of branches in that particular district. So there was one lead bank officer, now it is called lead district manager. So district wise, who are coordinating all these things, and side by side the concept of priority sector came. So there was a thirst on opening of new branches, and particularly in the unbanked area, because the government wanted to reach the banking system up to the remotest places in India. And there was vast expansion and everything. And you know, the banks were working at their own, as per their own system. And there were certain problems also. We'll be discussing all those things. But starting from this main topic, bank mergers and disinvestment in India, at present we are having 12 banks, which are, you can say, nationalized banks or government-owned banks. And thereafter, because I am not going into much details of that, because we'll be then we will not be able to cover our entire topic also. And now in this, my entire this PPT, I'm going to cover these topics. One is different type of banks in India, because some basic conceptual clarity is required. Then merger done so far. Then merger to be done in near future. Then public sector and privatization. What are the rationals? Means public sector has its own rationals. Privatization has its own rationals, as Dr. Gupta has nicely covered. And then implementation challenges. There are so many challenges in implementation also. So I'll be trying to cover these topics. Now we have in our banking system, we have 4 types of banks. One, commercial banks. In commercial banks, we are covering public sector banks, then private banks, then regional rural banks, and foreign banks. And among public sector banks, there are nationalized and otherwise also nationalized. In nationalized, government has the entire share, and in public sector bank, in any bank where the share is more than 51% with the government, it is a public sector bank. Then private sector, presently there are around 21 private sector banks. Then regional rural banks. Regional rural banks, they were very good in number. They were 256. But after amalgamation, during last 5, 7, 10 years, in processes it was going. Now there are only 43 regional rural banks, and the government has tried to merge the bank state-wise. In small states, there is only one, like in Haryana, it is Sarv Haryana Gramin Bank. In Punjab, it is Punjab Gramin Bank, whereas there were 4 or 5 banks earlier in Haryana also, the RRBs, and as well as Punjab also. But in some states, where the states are big or the branches are, there are a good number of branches, there are more than one also. Then foreign banks. Presently, there are 46 foreign banks in India. So these are commercial banks, and commercial banks, they are performing all activities. They are accepting deposits also, they are making advances also, they are providing ancillary services also, they are doing foreign exchange business also, they are doing government business also, everything they are doing. Then the concept of, and second part was cooperative bank. In between B and C, I'll be covering, and there were cooperative banks. So cooperative banks also, urban cooperative banks, and there are rural cooperative banks also. Then there are cooperative societies and everything. It is in that concept, it is covered. Now the concept, recent concept is small finance banks and then payment banks. What is the difference between two? Small finance banks, they are for small and micro level. One particular area they are getting, and they are trying to approach at the micro level, whether it is farmer, whether it is SME, MSME. So they are trying to approach that area, and stress and thrust is on that part only. Then payment banks, they are not able to do other business. They are looking after deposits only, and earlier it was per customer, it was restricted to 1 lakh. Now it is now for 2 lakh. They can do up to 2 lakhs. So this is a banking structure of banks in India, means commercial banks, small finance banks, payment banks, then cooperative banks. Now switching to my next slide. This is how the process of merger continued. Actually, in 1969, there were 14 major banks were nationalized. In 1986, banks were nationalized like this. And thereafter, New Bank of India merged with PNB after 1990. So there were 19 banks at all. And SBI and Associates, they were 8 banks. So they started from SBI and Associates. And all associate banks merged with SBI. And one more bank, it was formed for women only, where the staff it was managed by women. It was the entire staff were from ladies, and particularly they wanted to put the thrust on ladies customer only, because in some of the areas the ladies particularly they don't have that much freedom that they go to the bank and like this. But when a bank was earmarked for ladies only, for women only, the government thought of that, yes, this is just like a priority sector, that this is reserved for women only. But later on, this Bharatiya Mahila Bank also merged with SBI. So there is one SBI that has got all of its associates and one this Mahila Bank. Then in April 19, so Dena Bank and Vijaya Bank, they merged with Bank of Baroda. Now, let me make the difference between amalgamation and merger also. In merger, one or two or more banks, they merge into one big bank and the name remains almost the same. But in amalgamation, when the banks one or two or three, they are merged together, generally they change the name also. Like in Haryana Bank, it was Haryana Gramin Bank before that, and some other banks, when they merged together, it became Sarv Haryana Gramin Bank, like this. And in some cases, even after amalgamation, the name of the bigger bank, it is continued. So in case of merger, merger means one big bank takes over other two. They are merged into it, but the basic policy matter, basic guidelines, basic system of the main bank remains there. This is the difference. So Dena Bank and Vijaya Bank merged with Bank of Baroda in April 19. Then in April 20, so there were four mergers, one OBC and United Bank of India, they merged with PNB. Then Syndicate Bank merged with Canara Bank. Andhra Bank and Corporation Bank, they merged with Union Bank of India, and Allahabad Bank merged with Indian Bank. So after merger, up to this system, now the total number of nationalized banks remains 12, including State Bank of India. Though it is government-owned bank and it is formed by different act only, but yes, it is government-owned bank. So at par, almost we can say it is also at par with, in one way or the other, with nationalized banks. So there are 12 now. Now thereafter, let us move further. Now four banks, another four banks. There was earlier the government had decided two, but now the Niti Aayog, they have earmarked four banks where they will be shedding their share. That is Bank of Maharashtra, Bank of India, Indian Overseas Bank, and Central Bank of India. Now this has been earmarked not for merger. These banks have been earmarked for privatization. So the government will be shedding its share to the private owners. In case of merger, the ownership still remains with the government. When I am talking about these banks, the ownership remains with the government only. Whether OBC and United Bank, they have merged with PNB, but PNB is nationalized, so ownership remains with the government only. Similarly, Syndicate Bank is merged with Canara Bank, ownership remains with the government only. But here in this case, they will be shedding, government will be shedding the share towards privatization. It will be undertaken in phased manner, and as yet not decided how much share of which bank will be shed. Then there is a committee, this is Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs. This is the committee who actually approves all these things, and they have approved disinvestment of IDBI Bank also. Though IDBI Bank is a private bank, but majority of the share is with the government vis-a-vis LIC. Means LIC is holding around 50%, 49.24%, and government holds 45.48. It means around 95% of the share is with the government. So the committee has approved disinvestment in IDBI also. And side by side, there in a very recent decision, there is the process of opening one bank named Bad Bank. Means it has also been initiated, where the top 100 NPA accounts, those will be transferred from different banks to cater to the requirements there and for recovery. We'll be discussing the need for NPAs, recovery in NPAs, upgradation of accounts, and all these things. But yes, the government has decided that we should form a separate bank for that, and top 100 accounts from different banks, those will be transferred to Bad Bank. Now coming to the rationals. Of course, Dr. Gupta has very nicely covered it. But yes, I leave the opinion to the audience. Whether public sector is good or private sector is good, I won't be saying anything in favor or against. I'll be talking about the uh, means good features or characteristics of public sector and private sector also, and just a little comparison also. And thereafter, I'll be covering that what are the problems in that, what are the issues involved in implementation, because implementation is also not that much simple. That when you can just one public sector bank is privatized, or even if it is merged, there are some teething problems. Because I have practically seen all this, so I'll be able to cover some practical issues also. So now coming to public sector. First and foremost is long connectivity of customers. You see, our customers are connected since long time. They say, sometimes the people come with some passbook of their grandfather that see the passbook that in 1933, 1947 or 1945, my grandmother father was customer of Punjab National Bank or some other bank like this. So people have long connectivity, and the bank to which they are connected, uh, they are satisfied with that. Of course, some problems are there, everything is there, but still they want to continue with that bank. So this is like means our heart, soul, everything is connected to a few things, and we don't want to leave that. Then second one is wide network of branches. So, Dr. Chaddha, I am able to convey everything because I cannot. Hello,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
hello.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
sir. Yes.
You're very much audible and very fine presentation, sir.
Oh, thank you very much. Then wide network of branches, because we have very wide network of branches. One bank is having branch at Delhi. Mando, they are having some branches in Delhi. They are having the branches at farthest point also. I remember in Punjab National Bank, we have one branch at PEO. PO is a place where it takes a lot of time to reach even. So wide network of branches from north to south, east to west, everywhere. And the customers, they are having access to the accounts there. And side by side, not only in cities or big stations, we are having branches in very small villages, towns also. Then equitable access for all. This is very important in case of public sector. Equitable access for all means the public sector does not earmark that this is a lobby for the VVIP customers, this is a common place for the general customers. And side by side, any deposit account, even a labor can open, even a ready wala can open, and even a very big businessman can open. Similarly, for advances also, anyone who is eligible as per the scheme, they can have access to that. Means equitable access for all in case of all facilities being provided by public sector banks. Then all of us will agree to this affordable financial services, that our service charges, of course, now the in competition and after financial sector reforms and everything, some of the banks have raised their service charges, but by now service charges were negligible with the public sector banks. These are very affordable. For draft, you have to pay only 2 rupees, 1 rupees, 5 rupees, everything. But now the things are changing. But still, the public sector banks, they are charging much lesser than private banks. Then one aspect which Dr. Gupta also stressed on, that bulk industrial growth, because the public sector banks have the volume of funds with them. They can generate funds also, and they can cater to the need of bulk requirement of industrialists, and there can be a system of bulk industrial growth. Means I give you the example that I was working with corporate branch in Chandigarh, And from there, we had financed sub-units in, you can say, Odisha, like this Naveen Jindal group and some other groups, because Odisha government had given some uh, means concessions to the industrialists who set up their industrial and their industries there, and there was very big requirement of funds, and the nationalized banks, they even in consortium, they had to be there 10, 12, 15 banks. So in Jindal's also, there were more than 10 banks. Of course, some of the banks were private banks also. The majority of the share was either with PNB or State Bank of India. So they have contributed a lot towards big industrial growth. And sometimes they are making contracts with the government even, that yes, you are giving concessions for set up a unit in a particular area. You are setting up an industrial this development center in particular area. We'll be providing these much facilities there. Of course, they were out of access. Still, they are cooperating with the governments to provide the services in that area. Then job security. This is also very important, because in a bank, the people who are working there, they have their job, public sector bank, their jobs are secure. Means they know that yes, today we have joined. If we don't create anything which can remove us from the bank, any odd thing, or we go, if we continue our services as per the terms and conditions of bank and we work honestly, nobody is going to remove us till we retire. So job security is very, because in social system, the creation of jobs and maintenance of jobs, these two things are very important. Not only creation, of course, some corporates, some public sector, they create lot of jobs, but these jobs are not secured. They are hiring 200, 300, 500 people at for a call center, and after 1 year, the call center is not there at all, and all those 500s are out of job. So job security is very important aspect of public sector. Then we are coming to one more very important sector, implementation of government-sponsored schemes. So government-sponsored schemes, because the government is coming up with the schemes, particularly for the poorest of the poor. But they require some platform for implementation of schemes. So public sector banks are the best platform. It was Prime Minister Rozgar Yojana, like your many other things, now Mudra Yojana. There are so many other guidelines. So priority sector means the target for these nationalized bank or public sector banks, it is around 40% of the total credit for this priority sector, and government sponsored schemes are part of that all, and even weaker sector. So the private banks, they were not approaching up to these level of people. These were the public sector banks who were standing with the government and to meet their expectations. Like this Jan Dhan Yojana, the banks have done a very, public sector banks, they have done wonderful job, and they have met the targets of the government earlier than the target was given to them. Crores of accounts, millions of accounts they have opened in very few days. And the people today, one Rediwala, today even one maid who is working in our homes, they have their bank account. So this is the, you can say, something very important which public sector has given to us. I don't say that private sector won't be able to do, but definitely public sector has done a wonderful job in that way. Then experienced manpower. This is also very important, because the people who are working there, they are working for years together. So they have experience. Then they are going to, somebody is going to credit, somebody is going to IT, and being connected to the same institution for years together, they have lot of experience. But yes, thereafter, because I'll be covering private sector separately, then definitely pioneers of priority sector, that I have covered in upper point also, implementation of government sponsored schemes. And then one more thing, public sector carries, which it is maybe a drawback, but yes, it is there, underutilization of capacity, because the people who are working, they are working that only remaining part, Nobody is doing. So the capacity, if we have a bigger capacity, there was a issue that underutilization of capacity was there. And there was a time, I tell you, when we joined the bank in the beginning, long back in 1984, there were around 72 staff members in uh, big branches. Like I was lead district manager in Sirsa, and we were looking for some attendance register for some person to attend the court. And I was surprised to see that in 1976 there were 72 people working there, whereas today the business is multi times and only 12 or 14 people are working there. So that was there. But yes, public sector was in that way doing well. Now coming to private sector, because none of the system I am going to pioneer that this is good or this is not good. But yes, I'll be leave everything to the audience only. But definitely I'll be covering the good part, rationals for and against both. The private sector, as Mr. Gupta told, yes, it is a business concern, private sector. So profitability approach is the basic approach. So service charges are very high. Similarly, they will be taking only those ventures which they find profitable. Then second, professional management. Here in public sector, the management almost, except top management, few people they are changing. Otherwise, starting from clerk to CGM, the same people coming from the same bank, just getting promotion and like this. But in private sector, the management is professional. They keep on changing. They keep on hiring the better professionals to manage the system. And they are coming with new ideas also, new things are coming, and definitely it adds to improvement of the overall system, overall working. Then this concept, of course, it has been adopted by public sector banks also, but it came from the private sector only. It is agreed at every point that personalized service to high value customers. To some extent, private sector says is very important. Just to distinguish the distinguished customers, they should be given VVIP treatment. That's why they have prepared separate lounges for them. They are giving different services to them. Some specialized personalized services given. People are coming to them, getting everything done while they are sitting at their place. The next point is lesser NPS. Because the time is also going, so I'll try to cover a bit faster. Lesser NPS, because they have better control on NPS. Our system is same person is doing finance, same person is looking after, means overall head I am talking of in public sector. One manager, branch manager is there. He is responsible for deposit, responsible for profitability, responsible for advances, responsible for reduction in NPS. For everything he is responsible. But here in private sector, even at different levels, the people who are looking after NPS, they'll be looking only those accounts also, and they will be after the customers. They will making calls, going there personally, and side by side there are some agencies also who are going there, and they are just pressurizing the customers to keep their account regular. And of course, there are some limitations with public sector banks which private sector can do. In public sector, it is not easily possible to convert an NPA account to put some funds by giving another loan to the same customer, and in NPA that is adjusted and fresh repayment schedule is given in some cases. But yes, in public sector, it is not easily possible. So this is a management, I can say it is not a drawback. This is a management, because they say the viability, whether in the past there was low resources with the customer and now the customer has resources and now he can pay now. Instead of keeping his account in NPA, it is better that to give some concession to him, give some more money to him, and to bring his account out of NPA so that he is able to generate income and repay the bank loan. Then very important factor is quick decision making. Now in corporates, what is happening? That even during lockdown, one decision, one starts from the bottom and reaches up to top, and it is done on the same day. Just mail is going, one is writing, doing everything, studying that, making suggestions, and then he is making his recommendations, going to another one, then going to still another senior officer, and till CEO by evening it is decided. But in public sector banks, even moving an application for issuance of duplicate passport, it is not done on the same day. So, and even in finances, like Mr. Gupta has given a very good decision of Punjab Tractors, means till the decision was taken, the share price has gone had gone very low. So in corporate private sector, it is very quick decision making, and they are able to take decisions when it is required. Then one of the bigger this hindrance in the working of public sector, it was trade unions. Earlier, trade unions, they were very big hindrance to the public sector, and even when the computerization was there, the trade unions had made very big hue and cry, and they had to bargain also. Every employee was given 1 or 2 increments in lieu of that. So here, no trade unions, boss is always boss, whatever he tells, it is to be done. Of course, they are open for suggestions, everything. It is not that, yes, everything, it is coming from top to bottom, whatever he says, it is done. Definitely, they accept the suggestions, good things are there, but yes, but still, no hindrance. Then shift to digitalized banking. Earlier, the banking in public sector, even after computerization, it was not that much fast. It is private sector only, and hats off to them that they introduced all these things. And with that, public sector also started gaining, and now you have very good payment systems, then cards, ATM cards, credit card, everything is there, and internet banking. Sorry. Then more autonomy, definitely, because there is no government interference, no political interference, and they are autonomous to do whatever they like. And side by side, they are using the services of this business correspondents and direct selling agents. So they are giving some commission to them, and in turn, they are getting very good business and they are earning a lot. So that's why you see private sector, their finances are generally costly. Their loans are generally costlier than public sector banks. Still the people are going there because of this, that it is done in a time bound manner. One time has given that yes, in 2 days, 5 days, it will be done. Generally, it is done in that time. The people goes to his place with the documents, gets everything done, clears everything. And I am really happy that they are carrying all precautions relating to KYC norms and CIBIL and everything. Of course, there are certain shortcuts which public sector cannot do, private sector can do, because they have approached to their authorities immediately. While sitting there before the customer, the person can talk to his boss that this is the problem, and if you permit, I can go with that, and the papers will be available in some time. They generally allow it. But in public sector, we are going by the books only, by circulars only, guidelines only. So these things are doing a few things which are really not working for public sector. So in the end, I am coming to, yes, I hope I have not taken too much time. Of course, it is beyond that. So I'll try to do that. Now, the main challenge is your different core banking softwares, because we are working not working manually. We are working on softwares, and software Finacle, Banks, and FlexCube. These are 3 main softwares. Finacle is by Infosys, Banks is by Tata, and FlexCube is by Oracle. So when one bank is working in Finacle, if it is merged with another bank who is working on banks, so entire knowledge of any employee, that will be zero. Because now they are not using their brain, they are using the commands which are coming and they are writing. So this is the system. The government might have thought at that time also that if something happens, how it will be done when there are different operating system, core banking softwares. So the after mergers, after privatization, these things are definitely likely to affect the system adversely. Then different service conditions of employees means if you are merging two nationalized banks, it won't have much effect. But if, in case of privatization, the person is in contract with that bank for certain service conditions, where the private banks may not be able to meet that. Because maybe a person of one level in nationalized bank is getting 1 lakh, in their bank it will be getting 20,000. Hypothetically, I am taking the example, it will be taking 20,000 only or 30,000 only. So they cannot reduce his salary to 30,000, and they cannot increase the salary of the person who is getting 30,000 to 1 lakh. So, and side by side, different service condition, other service condition other than salary also. So this is something which is very difficult to adopt easily. So definitely some of the staff have to be retrenched, and some VRS is to be given, all these things. But the process is not that much simple. Then high cost of services to customers. Definitely in these banks, there is very high cost. Definitely a person who is working with a nationalized bank, who without his consent, his bank is merged into one, means given to one private sector. And if he likes to continue his services from that bank, definitely he has to pay higher, which any customer won't like. Then more vulnerable to digital frauds. I'll be able to discuss a few things about this, because their number of outsider is very high. Like your business correspondents, like DSAs, maybe some other people who are opening accounts, they are opening accounts on commission basis, and they are getting their documents from the customers, and many of the documents have been used for some other purposes also. Because when a person is coming to a bank, handing over the documents to an authorized person, definitely there is very little chance of using those documents. But when a person is going there and getting some person is going for opening account, some person is going for other services, so he may take any n number of papers, and those number of papers can be utilized anywhere. So there is a chance of digital frauds. Then risk of diversion of funds to own companies. This has also happened in some of the private banks, that they have diverted the funds to their own companies, to their own near and dear ones. They have given huge amount to those people, and many times they are not reporting to RBI the exact position of things. Now the RBI has come out with more stringent rules, but in earlier there had been some certain cases also. Risk of managed audits also, because now the number of auditors is 3. Earlier there was one audit company which was holding audit for one bank. So there was a risk that it can be managed in one way or the other. And in the end, last but not the least, shift in approach from social service to profitability. So what will happen of the people who are going for open Jan Dhan account? Whether they'll be able to go to a private bank where the entry is not that much easy, that it is very enlightened, full on this air conditions and everything. I just give you one example. My sabzi wala, where I go to taking fruit, etc. He said, "Sir, this bank is just opposite me, and they are not opening my account." I said, "Why? Whether you don't have the KYC documents or other?" He said, "I have everything, but they are telling you will have to keep 25,000 minimum in your account." He says, "I won't be having 25,000 anytime during next many years. Of course, 2-3,000 I'll be able to keep." So such people, they will definitely remember that yes, public sector is there to support us. So with this, I have completed, and I think my audience might have liked it, and I was able to do justice. I don't know, but yes, I have tried to do my best.
Right. Thank you, Patia Saab, for a very interesting and comprehensive session and a presentation on how the public sector banks came around and what changes were made during the 1990s and what lies in store for the future. So I think we had two wonderful presentations today on the public sector undertakings and lastly on the especially with case study of banking sector. So now we can take a few questions. We had some questions coming from. I think if Saibi Saab, you are there, then you can ask your question in person. Dr. Saibi, are you there? Yeah. So please ask your question. I think we have two, three questions only, so we can give time.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
Dr.
Good
Saibi,
afternoon,
you may
Professor
please ask.
Chaddha, and giving this opportunity and wonderful presentation by both the presenters. Really, it's a wonderful experience to listen to them also. It's not a query. It is something that if privatization of the public sector undertaking is being thought, it's not a one-day job. It is a long process. Maybe certain things going around, which I think the government might have thought all about it. I think in every system there are plus and minus, and here I think at the moment there may be something, but these loopholes are should have been thought of plugging. So the things may improve, I think, because it is the public at large which are concerned over here. So all the sector they are giving undoubtedly services is very good at the moment, but there should be some competition. So then only we have an edge
Unmute
and
your mic.
pass in the life. So I think some loopholes that should be some they are required to be identified, and some indicators are required to be developed. So how there can be a check. So that is a little bit of my suggestions. You may ask it is consider it as a query. But secondly, what I feel, the bank, whether it's a public sector or whether it's a private sector, they must also think about the public who are going to the bank, because they have a lot of trust. And nowadays, everybody in the old era, if we look, say our generation back, our fathers, forefathers, they used to keep the money at home. But now, and Saukar, sometimes they go to Saukar and get the money for them as a loan. And they were not able to repay even the capital or the main amount they had taken, interest is so. But here also at the presently, the people who are really getting loan, especially the home loan, they are taxed so much. I mean, the investment or the interest is so much. They keep on paying, keep on paying. The bankers must think over it. There should be some strategy how the people can be helped here to repay the loan. There are many schemes, in fact, but the bankers are not able to disseminate into the ground level. So banks should think of all these issues so that the public at large, they should not be only a recovery that they have the laws, and when you go to the bank, so many papers they put before you, and many are not readable. Simply sign, sign, sign this and sign. So the person who has to take the loan, he comes into action and sign all the paper. He doesn't know what is written there. But banks consider himself to be secure once the papers, all the documents are signed, because these are to be audited. Maybe for that purpose, I think they require. And once the person is not able to pay the that debt, so he feels and his economy is shattered. It is his family who suffers a lot. So there are many social issues related. So my suggestion is bankers should think on this line, not only becoming a regulator, rather a helping hand should be tendered to the public. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Dr. Gupta, would you like to respond?
Well said, Dr. Saibi. Yes, there are always loopholes whenever we introduce a new system, and then those loopholes are taken care of. And as we always say, that we are very good at finding loopholes to save taxes or to take care of the policies. But if we look at in the long run, yes, whatever loopholes are there, they are being plugged, And I always say that there is always a word of caution. Whenever we disinvest, we have to be slightly careful. But the only thing is that while being careful, we cannot be lethargic. Like if you see the case of Air India, we have been trying to sell it off because of it has taken so much time to offload the equity. We are not getting buyers. Similarly, in many other cases, the things are getting prolonged to plug the loopholes. So, in my view, both of things can run side by side. We can try plugging the loopholes wherever we have, but shouldn't deter us from offloading the equity. This is my view, Dr. Sahibi.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Gupta.
Hello.
Yes.
Can I ask some, say something?
One moment, Sharma ji, just one moment. Yeah. Pushan ji, would you like to add upon what Dr. Gupta said? Or
Yes, yes, definitely. I like to add upon. Actually, Dr. Sahibi, he is much concerned about the cost of products also. Banks they are offering, means particularly housing loan and other things to some extent. So that way, definitely the government is coming out with some new incentives. You know, in housing loans up to 30 lakh, there is one incentive scheme in interest also. And side by side, the rate of interest has come drastically down. The people who have taken loan at 5-6 years back, they had taken loan at 10-12%, and now it is around 7%. So the rate of interest is also coming down. And side by side, when there is some requirement, they are giving some more time for repayment also, so the account is not transferred, categorized as NPA. Now the 30 years time they have given, earlier it was 20 years. Now the person who is of, you can say, up to age of up to 30 years, even up to 35 years, he takes loan, he or she takes loan. So repayment can be up to 30 years. So this longer repayment also, it gives a big relief that you are availing a loan at low cost, very low cost, and it is not putting much burden on your carry home income also.
right. Thank you, Patia Sahab. Yeah, Dr. Surendra Sharma, now you may please ask your question.
Namaskar to everybody, and I'd like to bring your attention towards the LIC and the general insurance companies. We have talked about steel, this thing, and other core industries, including the banking. But as of today, LIC remains the major financer to the government. They have more than 10 lakh crore of investable funds, which the government takes. So, what a point I want to emphasize is coexistence of public and private sector is required. It is not that only public sector will carry us forward or only the private sector will carry us forward. Notwithstanding that VUCA is there, we are living in a VUCA world, which is volatile, complex, ambiguous, and say, which is changing so rapidly that what I am saying now, in the next meeting, I may not be saying so. So we have to adapt to those changes and change ourselves, our industries, our say systems accordingly.
Correct.
Because it's a global phenomenon. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sharma, for this very nice observation. I think we take what you say, and it is very much required. Now, Dr. Muhammad Suleiman, you had, I think, a couple of questions that you wanted to ask. Please go ahead.
Yeah. Can I, whether I'm audible?
Yeah, you
Yes,
are
sir.
audible. Please go ahead.
Very much audible.
Yeah. My question is, actually, the concept of public sector was introduced 60 years back by the Indira Gandhi and the Nehruvian period. After that, lot of infrastructure were created for Coal India and airlines, Indian Airlines, ports, and etc. so many Navratna companies are still in existence. So they are giving employment to the people, those who are in need of employment. Somewhat their jobs are so protected. Job security is there. They are paying very high salary and giving all the benefits to the employees. But whereas in private sector, these are all absent. They are introducing hiring and firing method. Every 6 months or 1 year, you have to switch over to another company for a better salary. Sometimes you will be fired. So job security is not available in private sectors. Moreover, the public sectors are biggest contributors of GDP. They are contributing crores of rupees. For example, I worked in Malabar Cement for 37 years. You cannot imagine a man working in a company for 37 years. Can you imagine it in private company? It's not possible. So moreover, the government of Kerala invested in Malabar Cements only 28 crores 30 years back. But after that, as a PSU, we have contributed more than 3,000 crores to the government in various taxes and other methods. So somewhat the PSUs are biggest contributors of GDP as well as the state and central tax. So that is why it is the duty of the government to protect the PSUs for not only for income and providing employment to the publics. The publics are getting employment only in PSUs, not in the private sector. Private sectors are exploiters. They are appointing the people, they are recruiting the people only to make their profit. If any employee is getting old, they will send him home. They will not maintain them for years. They will not get any benefit in private sectors. So that is why the government policy is to be maintained. They have to maintain the PSUs. You know, for example, 2 years back, there was a privatization of a Trivandrum airport. Actually, the Kerala government also participated in the tender, but that was not given. Only small problem in tender conditions or some rate problems. Even government of Kerala approached the High Court. High Court also go with the tender conditions. So that is why Trivandrum airport was given green signal for privatization. And Vizhinjam port also privatized. So in that way, the privatization leads to somewhat the government is losing their profit and infrastructure also. Infrastructure for private public sectors were created over the years, not for a single day or single year. It was created 50 years, 40 years likewise. But in a fine morning, they are handing over to private sector and disinvesting or selling the share. So that is not the good policy. The government is shrinking their responsibility. So that is my view.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Suleiman. Yeah, Gupta ji, would you like to respond to what primarily it's about, employment generation and, again, what we talked about, selling the family silver. Yeah.
I agree with Dr. Suleiman to some extent. Well, when we talk of job security, well, anybody who is skilled enough to work, whether it's a private or a public sector undertaking, he will not lose his job. We all say that private sector, they hire and fire. But, well, if we really look into the details, why they were hired and why they were fired, it is the job efficiency, the job skill development, it is the work that they can do. Because here we are competing with the world's best MNCs. We are competing with the world where the cost is low. If we keep on holding the employees with high salaries, with the less output, that means the product cost is going to be high, and then we cannot compete. So, well, the employees will have to develop their skills. You can't say that, well, I'm an engineer, I passed out in 2000, and today my education level is the same, but it was in 2000. The world is changing over. The world is getting into artificial intelligence. So shouldn't I also upgrade my skills, my knowledge? And if I'm able to do it, no private company will ever fire it. But if I'm not doing it, then I become a white elephant. Then why should a company keep it? Whether it is the private sector or the public sector. If public sector is keeping its employees which are not efficient, probably they cannot compete with the imports. That is one point. And second, when we are talking of GDP, we are not saying that the public sector undertakings should close down. They will keep on working. They will keep on producing the goods. So they will keep on contributing to the GDP of India. We are not saying that the public sector undertaking should be shut down and there should be no production. We are just handing over the production from one owner to the second owner, and maybe that the second owner in most of the cases we have seen has improved the production, which goes
Interfere.
we can add
Sorry
more.
to interfere. Sorry to interfere. Further clarification is required in this point. What is my point is, the government is privatizing only profit-making private public sectors, not the loss-making public sectors.
So,
Whereas in Kerala, government is encouraging public sectors and supporting the private sectors. Even they are taking over the public sector, those who are loss-making. So it is a question of instrumentation. One instrumentation is there. They are having two branches, one in Kota and another in Palakkad. Now the government of Kerala has taken over this unit because it is loss-making. Only because of the loss-making unit in Kota, it is affected the stability of this unit. Actually, this unit is making profit. But government of Kerala, they have taken over this PSU and encouraging, they are supporting the instrumentation to grow instead of privatizing it. So that is why profit-making public sectors are privatized by the central government. So that is my view.
see, even if they are profit making, my point is that today government of India requires money for building infrastructure, say hospitals, the roads, the airports, or maybe many other schools, colleges. So from where will they get the money? They can certainly disinvest to some extent in those profit making companies, because then they will get a higher revenue and invest in somewhere else. That is my point of view, that we can certainly afford to disinvest where we invested 50 years back. We are getting a lot of money out of it, which we can invest somewhere else. That is the issue today. Otherwise, from where will the government of India get the money to build up hospitals? They will have to either take a loan. So instead of that, that's why I said a word of caution. This money should go only not to run the house, but to build more infrastructures. That is my point.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Gupta. Yeah, Patia sir, would you like to supplement?
Yes.
Yes,
To
please.
some little one. Actually, what happens when there is disinvestment? There are certain parameters on which the value is calculated, and those parameters many times they are not exactly as per the present day situation. Say, for example, one bank, they are having their head office in Delhi Parliament Street, say, and the value of that building in the books it is 1 rupee. Okay, after some time it is again valued, but not to some extent that it will be 10,000 crore or 15,000 crores. And share value is the basic thing which determines at what price the value this private company should take that. And while valuing the assets, there is really a big problem. That's why when these private sectors, when they take over one, even sick public sector company, they simply sell the assets they acquire and they are into profit. Same thing happened with PTL. Same thing happened with so many other companies also. So there are some parameters which are required to be corrected, and that can be done with the honest and true involvement of the people in the policy matter. Because you cannot forget that those assets, it book value is rupee 1. If it is revalued after a given time, maybe 5 years, 10 years, even then the book value will be very, very low in comparison to actual real value. And sometimes the assets of real asset the company is having, value of those real assets is more than the value at which it has been sold. So these factors matter a lot, definitely matter a lot, and these things are to be taken care of, particularly while sending very old public sector units. And I agree with Dr. Gupta that government needs funds for development, for further development, because our economy since COVID, it is not doing very well at all. But during last few years, with the overall system of means globalization, so everywhere it is very slow growth. So we definitely need some funds, and some funds are required to be taken. But yes, I agree with Dr. Mohammed Suleiman that some of the units, we should be very selective that which units are to be sold and which units are to be given to the other public sector. Because the banks in India, it is a record in entire world that since independence, not even a single public sector bank has failed. Till today, since independence, no single bank has failed. Whereas even entire world, some bank, very big bank or small bank, they are in red. Of course, some banks are in red. When the banks are in red, what government is taking, that they are giving it to some bank which is doing better. Okay, some merger is there. You know, in case of New Bank of India, there were a few things which was required to be corrected. It was given to PNB, which was doing well. Now both the banks are as a single entity. It is doing very well because that is like a bird tree, which has very long branches. When there was a case relating to this Nirav Modi issue, some people were telling that Punjab National Bank now it will be no more, it is going to fail. And I was telling people, it is a very big banyan tree having thousands of branches, and this case is like one very little part of one branch. So that banyan tree will remain forever, it will never go. And they were able to wipe off the losses in 1 quarter only. So it is not that just privatization is the only solution. Yes, to some extent, both things are required to be done simultaneously and with great thinking.
Right.
I'm
Thank you, Patel.
I'm always saying there's a word of caution when we privatize.
Yes.
We have to be very selective. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you, Mohammed Suleiman sir, for asking a very nice question, and Patia Saab and Dr. Gupta to have answered it all well. So I think we have already exceeded the brief in terms of timing. We are touching 2 hours, and I think we had a very interesting conversation. It never felt that we have touched 2 hours as of now.
Yes.
So friends, this being a Sunday, and I think everybody will be waiting for your lunch. So I think it will be bad on our part if we just continue, even though I would have liked to continue this because this is a topic which is of my heart, and having worked in a financial institution also for 10 years and into finance. But I would really like to thank, the two wonderful panelists that we had today, Dr. Sanjeev Gupta and Mr. Bhushan Bhatia, for having spared their time and, had a very wonderful heart-to-heart talk on what ails the public sector, why it was relevant, and what are the issues still, how it will go about. I would also like to thank the wonderful audience that we have, who joined us one fine Sunday 47 weeks ago, and we are still doing it with their blessings and with their, and mind you, there is no compulsion for them to join, and it becomes such interactive also. I would also like to thank the IHRDI team comprising of Sanya, Dr. Surinder Sharma, Dr. Sahibi, Dr. Mohammed Suleiman, Mr. Talwar, Mr. Jeet Kumar Gupta ji, who work from the background and with some topics, with help us with speakers and what should be the format and everything that they do. Now, friends, just to sum it up on this count, I think the public sector was a need of the hour during the 1947, and the government at that point of time was very correct in going through the public sector with the 5-year plans and then Mellon office model, and because the focus was also quite clear, because I remember having done a project wherein they wanted to set up a few meters of a pull or a bridge in Allahabad, and they had to import the steel from some other country. Just consider this aspect, and today what we are in that position in today's time, how we have come from strength to strength, wherein we are exporting steel, not only fulfilling our own demand, but also exporting steel to other countries and other nations as such. So the stress on the basic infrastructure, stress on the utilities part, the stress on power, energy, stress on banking, development banking also. All this was quite much required at that point of time. But then I think the situation went wayward after 1970s, because then we turned on to what we were discussing also, to job securities, inefficiencies, no accountabilities, and therefore what had been and what should have been a cash cows actually converted them into some kind of inefficient vehicles, which were good only for maybe a few politicians and maybe some other officers as such. So thereafter, what has happened is, then when today's time we cannot go for complete inefficiency. Today we are not competing. It is not the actually competition between a private and a public sector. It is the competition between world over. It is the competition between Indian companies and Chinese companies. It is the competition between Americans, and today even Americans, they and Europe, which were the key and which were kings, today they have faltered in front of Taiwan, in front of Japan, in front of China especially. See, that is today. And if we just close the eyes and say things are not there, then it will not be beneficial for our cause. So I think the public sectors were relevant even in some areas, like Dr. Gupta talked about. They are relevant even today in some strategic areas, and there should be no private sector in nuclear science, in defense, in other strategic areas also. But yes, the hotel industry, the retail industry, the khadi, all these should be encouraged, and they should be brought about and be given a chance to the private entrepreneurs to work over. And then, but yes, what has happened today, if I keep on discussing this topic, and somebody would say, always say, see, they say both are bad. I mean, my friends, sometimes my friend would say both are bad, equally bad. I would say, how? He says the public sector are inefficient, private sectors have profit motive. Just take the case of today's time, take the case of hospitals. Though a lot of work has been done by our doctors, especially the government hospitals, and how private sector is still trying to milk up to 800 rupees medicine to 80,000 rupees, a few 50,000 rupees of oxygen concentrator to 2 lakh rupees. See how that is how we are. Actually, this is the problem, that we should say that this is how we are in terms of profit motive. I think if we have to encourage private sector on one hand side, then we should have a very good kind of a independence regulating agency, and which should be very fair. That institution has to build upon, which should be fair, which should have lot of teeth. And if the private sector do not actually then come on terms, because we have such institutions in America, Western Europe also, wherein Dr. Gupta talked about, they are encouraging. But without a independent regulating agency, uh, they should be fearful also, that if we do like this, our licenses will be cancelled, we will be put behind bars, we will be done for genocides and all this. So all this should come, and then the private sector would be also as good as the public sector in terms of the intentions. Profit motive is not bad. They have the right to go for profit, but then the profit should be genuine. This is one hand side, and then public sector should be there, still supporting the strategic areas. And I feel, I don't know how you feel about it, in those areas, like when we are talking about Maharatna, Navratna, Mini Ratna, why to disturb? Only in those areas when wherein there is a need welfare sector, fine. But if the public sector is also already rooted in some areas and they are doing well, let's say take the case of ONGC, Indian Oil Corporation, GAIL, take the case of State Bank of India and other banks, then why to disturb them? I mean, I feel, why to disturb them? And one point, privatization, not just for the sake of privatization, will be bad. They should be about to compete with other sectors. They should be given full autonomy in financial matters, in professional matters, in manpower recruitment matters, and even in sort of service matters, wherein if they are able to get incentives, they should have the right to hire and fire also. That Article 311 for the supreme kind of job security should not be there. I am just saying it should not be there, and the management should have the right to see whether that person is useful or it is not so useful, because then only they'll be able to compete. You cannot bind one leg of one party and say that you run with the private sector. It should not be done. It should not be done. The terms should be all right and adequate. So in that way, I think all the panelists and the participants, they agreed that the public sector is relevant. It has played a key role. It has played a yeoman's job in whatever today we are in terms of today we wish to be, some kind of a wish guru. We think we should be the best in terms of we are the vaccination capital. We are sending missions to Mars. We have people on moon. All these aspects are therein. But then for that to happen, we should not throw the baby with the bath towel. On whose shoulders we have come up, we should not be, penalizing those shoulders. If they are good enough, they should be about to continue. So friends, I think with these words, we come to an end of it. Just think it over. Many thanks everybody for joining this on Sunday afternoon. And till the time, just a notification that, the e-certificate will be available and the recording of this video will also be available. You have to just to ping upon 8727857116. I repeat, 8727857116. If you just send me your hi on this WhatsApp number, we'll be able to add you on to our mailing list and forward you the feedback form, which you'll fill up, and e-certificate will be sent to you. And later on, by Tuesday, Wednesday, we'll be able to send you the recording also. So friends, with these words, we come to an end, and thank you all of you for joining this wonderful presentation. Thanks to the panelists, thanks to the lovely audience, thanks to the IHRDI team. So till the time we meet next Sunday, goodbye to all of you. Namaskar, Sat Sri Akal, Salam, Sayonara.
Thank
Thank
you,
you,
Dr.
Dr.
Gupta, and all participants. Wonderful participants.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
Sir, thank you, sir.